So they're not this, full-on sort of leader that we often see in society and quite often get celebrated. And they lose confidence, they self-doubt, and they're not quite sure how to navigate out of there because it's uncharted territory for them.
Welcome to the Be Better broadcast. If you're someone who feels that they are in their midlife currently, if you're someone who, and by the way, that number could be different for everybody. If you're in your late 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, and you're saying to yourself, I'm stuck doing what I'm doing. I've been in this job or this career or this specific path for decades now. I can't imagine myself doing something different. Is it even possible to reinvent myself and go down a different path, a path that might be more fitting or more fulfilling, or a path that might be my own? Then this conversation is going to be for you. Today, we're going to talk about the topic known as midlife renewal. This is a topic that was coined by a very special individual named Neve, who was introduced to me by Pierre has been on the show in the past. And Tina talks all about midlife renewal and really carving your own path, even if that is in your mid or later years of your life. So be sure to check it out. If you take away even just one piece of value from this conversation with Tina, all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You are the reason the show has grown over the past 2.5 years to over 300 episodes, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. So without further ado, for those who don't know Tina Neve helps midlife professionals to regain confidence and self-belief, helping them to move forward in new, unimagined ways. Her holistic approach helps them to overcome psychological blocks and reframe their internal narrative so that they can make long-lasting, sustainable change and take the necessary action to move forward. Tina understands how culture, organization change, and transformation can impact individuals, and how events in our personal lives affect our perspective on our careers. Tina, it's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. It's lovely to be here.
Absolutely. So you've had several paths in your own professional career. You've been in HR, you've worked in executive search, you've done a lot of different things. And now you own and operate your own business where you help people to live these practices and put forth these practices and move forward in their midlife. So I'm curious to hear from you. Is this path something you found because you experienced it yourself? Or is it something you discovered in your work as an HR executive? Or where did this happen for you? How did you find yourself here?
Yeah, it's a combination of a number of paths coming together, really, because I've had my own midlife changes. And as with many folk in midlife, actually it's triggered by a series of events. It isn't something you always naturally do. But I was in a situation where, sadly, I lost my parents within a fairly short period of time. I lost my father. My mum was living on her own, and she'd lived with bipolar all her life. So she came to live with us. And then a few months after she came to live with us, she collapsed, and we found out that she had quite a serious lung disease that we didn't know she had. And I had my own breakdown, effectively, that some people do when these life events happen. I left work to look after her. And when she passed away, I literally had a blank sheet of paper in front of me. And it gave me a window of choice, which a lot of people don't always have in their lives. But I decided that I wanted to pull some strands together of what I'd learned in my career. I'd worked with people transitioning at all times. You know, when I worked in HR, there were transitions in people into the organisation. Sometimes there were transitions of people out. And also in executive search, you're dealing with people constantly at a point of transition. But what I realised during those times, that it often wasn't the sort of surface level of getting a new job that was the issue. It was how they felt about themselves inside. Were they good enough for that next role? Could they make that transition? You know, so it was how they felt about themselves that was the issue. And I decided that I had this window of opportunity and I'd like to help people that would make in that transition. So
Wow,
that's
very
where this
interesting.
started.
Yes. No, I appreciate you going there. I think that's
Yeah.
really important to know a bit of your background when it comes to that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, when it comes to you helping these individuals, especially these individuals at the top of business, especially
Yeah.
executives, when
Yeah.
you're helping them find a new placement, and then you're studying these really two different types of people, maybe there's more than two, but you're studying people who are confident in themselves and have the self-belief, and you also notice the people who they don't have that self-belief and that self-confidence,
Yeah.
but they're both in their midlife. So I'm curious, what do those people who do have that self-confidence, what do they believe about themselves that the other set of people do not?
I think sometimes they're one and the same person, because up until now they have been confident. They've, I mean, I've got clients currently who, if you looked at them on paper, have had a very, successful career and have achieved X, Y, Z and a senior, but something has knocked them off balance sometimes. And they lose confidence, they self-doubt, and they're not quite sure how to navigate out of there because it's uncharted territory for them. Because up until now, everything's either unfolded well in their career or something's come along that's knocked them. And sometimes these can be environmental issues where they work, a change of leadership and a change of the way they're approached, the work is done around them. It could be an unexpected redundancy. So they could, and this is where the self-doubt comes in, find themselves in the workplace out looking for a job for the first time in a long time. And it looks a lot different out there applying for work today than it did 10 to 20 years ago. So, sometimes they're not two different types of people. I'm going to be totally honest. The ones that are really confident don't end up my way.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Why is that? What do you
I
mean
don't
by that?
know. I tend to, the people that come to me tend to be finding it difficult to navigate change, whereas some people may have more self-belief that they can navigate change.
So these people who've had these life events, or who've had these experiences in their past jobs where they haven't had to apply for a job in 10, 20 years, like me, I've been working with the same company for 11 years now. Since I was 18, I've been in the same place. And I've risen to the highest levels of leadership here, and then started the business and all those things. So if I went on the job market now, I wouldn't even know where to begin. I would maybe look at Indeed, or I'd look at all these other places, but I'm 29 years old. So I wouldn't say I'm in my midlife. I guess you never know, right?
You don't know.
Exactly. But I wouldn't know where to begin. And I guess maybe because I wouldn't know where to begin, I already would be at a disadvantage. But I do see myself as a confident individual. And I do have this story of, I've done these things, I have these skills, I know what I'm doing in that regard, but I always have room to grow. So these individuals who don't have that confidence or self-belief, kind of a two-part question here. How do you identify that they don't have that? Like, is it something that they say? Is it something that they're doing? Is it an approach that they're taking? The reason I ask that is because what if some people listening think, well, how do I know if I have this limiting story or this lack of self-belief? And number two is, what are those people missing?
Yeah, I think there's a key bit in what you've just said there, and that's narrative. And that's the internal narrative we play in our own heads. So it's like you've just said, from your perspective, I've got a really good story to tell. Yeah. So I might not know how to navigate this environment and look for a new for a new role, even though I've been here a long time. But some people's narratives, they don't have a narrative, or they don't know what it is. They, or they underappreciate what they're really capable of. And sometimes these are, I don't want to go down too much of a road here, but these tend to be low ego leaders.
Low ego.
Rather than the high ego leaders.
So high empathy, low ego.
High empathy, low ego. probably very good people managers, a lot of the people that I deal with. So they're not this, full on sort of leader that we often see in society and quite often get celebrated. So they're a slightly different breed potentially of leader. So they don't recognize themselves potentially in some of the leadership profiles they see around them.
Yeah.
So there's, well, where do I fit in? What story have I got to tell? So they might not appreciate or understand what story they've got to tell. So I mean, my sort of philosophy is that self-awareness and self-compassion are foundations of change.
Self-awareness and self-compassion are the foundations
of change. Yeah, within. Because change starts within, it doesn't start without.
Self-awareness of what specifically?
Oh, it's just like there are a number of things. It's like, self-awareness of what got them to where they are today. Do they appreciate what's enabled them to get to where they are today? Do they understand what their values, what drives them? Yeah, what their drivers are, what their strengths are. And there's a really interesting thing around midlife, and I'm conscious you're not there yet, is that you develop a number of competencies and things that you do with ease. And we have this thing in our world today that actually we appreciate what people find difficult, what they've really strived for, done the marathon, their own personal Olympic medal. But we don't always appreciate what we're capable of doing that we do with ease. And it comes natural to us. Because by the time you've got to midlife and you've been successful in a role, you've built up all these skills and expertise that you should be able to do with ease. And a lot of people will think that it's complete rocket science what you do. But because you do it easily, you don't acknowledge it.
Wow. Yes, that's so true. Absolutely. I'm curious to hear from you. So when you, let's say when you were 30 years old.
Yeah.
Just a few years ago, of course.
Just a few years ago. Quite a few years ago, yeah.
Before we recorded here,
yeah,
we were talking for a few minutes and I mentioned how I can't imagine me in my 40s, 50s, 60s losing that confidence or that self-belief, but I don't know because you don't know what you don't know. I'm 29 right now.
Yeah.
So when you were 29 or 30, what was the story you told yourself about what your life was going to look like?
I'm going to be totally honest. I don't think I had a firm view of what that would be. It was a sort of probably misty view. I probably had a view that I would ideally, my 50s, perhaps be working part-time and not working so much.
Mm-hmm.
I probably didn't see it as a time of life when I would be perhaps as pretty ambitious and growing my career. That would probably be a general sort of view. And the thing is, a lot of people perhaps in their 20s or where you are may have this general view of what life might be like when you're 50, late 40s, 50s. But then it arrives. And the life you expected to have meets reality.
Mm.
Yeah. And that could be difficult for some people because they might have had certain expectations of what they thought life would be like.
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened. Or they don't fit into the mold of what they thought they should be at that point in their career.
Do you work with people who specifically fit that criteria?
Yeah, there are some people who I thought I would be here and I'm not.
So how do you help people who feel that they haven't met up to the own expectations that they created for themselves?
They create themselves. It's actually working out sometimes these sort of thought patterns that they've had. And it's very often around what I should be doing, what I need to be doing. And that quite often comes from society and comparison.
Wow.
So everyone else in the family's done X, Y, Z, You know, I'm a doctor, but I'm not a consultant, so I've failed, for example, you know, or I haven't made, you know, the exec leadership. I'm a leader, but I haven't made the exec leadership, you know, and that's where I'm expected to go. And I think there's also the construct of the career ladder actually almost sort of says we should do certain things, you know, but it is a social construct, the career ladder. Most people's careers are messy, you know, they don't follow a nice, neat line where you go up to the next level and the next level and the next level. And I've met a number of execs who've got so far and have actually gone, actually, I don't want them. I don't, I've seen what's next and I don't want it.
Yeah.
So what do I do if I don't want that?
Wow.
What's next? You know.
And what is next in that situation where the next step is something that they wouldn't necessarily want, even if it comes with this prestige and these accolades, but they don't want that lifestyle that goes along with that.
And then when it comes to going within, what drives you? Yeah. What drives you in your career? And that's where your values come in. For a number of people, are sort of driven by, some people are driven by actually wanting to be a leader and wanting to influence people. And it's like, well, where else can I do that rather than going to the next level?
Very true. Very true. So I want to get there. I want to get there. And I want to specifically ask you this because I think that you'll have a better answer or process than I had. Okay. So I had a client a long time ago, several years ago, who was a great woman. And I feel that in a lot of ways, I wasn't well equipped to help her with specifically what she needed. And I wish I knew you at this time because I would have talked to you back then. But she's in her 50s.
Yeah.
And she had a very successful past career. And she felt at this point in her life that she didn't know what she wanted next.
Yeah.
And she said, I just don't know what I want to do. I'm very unsure of where to go. So we did some exercises and some different thoughts and activities of, you know, what are your natural abilities? What really brings you the most joy and all these things. And we came down to some great things. She loves teaching people. She loves doing all these things. But even still, after several months of working together, she still wasn't quite sure what direction she wanted to head in. Yeah. So me as the coach, I'm feeling like I'm letting her down because I'm not helping her with the outcome that she wants.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm curious to hear if you had an individual in their midlife who said, Tina, I just don't know what I want to do next and what direction to head in. Yeah. How would you help somebody who's in that situation?
Yeah. I'm going to go right back to the beginning of my process because I'm a midlife career coach and therapist. So when I first meet clients, I do something called a career timeline. And that will often pull up some stuff that happens early in life that actually frames what we should be doing, or actually how we're treated in early life. And I never know what's going to come up in these scenarios. Some people might not start with their education, and I go, well, can you just tell me a bit what it was like at school? And I spoke to somebody recently who was the youngest of 5, for example, and all their siblings were going off to do these amazing things. So there was a competitive nature there. And there was something early on in life that actually you sometimes need to unpick a bit that leads to this, because the reason they can't move forward is because they're sort of pulled back, you know, they're pulled back to certain ways of thinking that enable them, that stop them moving forward. And sometimes you have to unpick that a little bit, and that releases something. Or they're not even aware of it. That's the thing. They're not even aware that this is actually happening internally within them. So it's sometimes working on those inner processes of the way they think. When I'm working sort of on that therapeutic level, sometimes brings some of these things out that are blocking them.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of your first steps, is this idea of the career timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. People look on one page where they've gone, and it's like achievements and stresses up and above the line and below the line. Everyone says, oh, my lines are all over the place. I went, everyone's life is all over the place. It's not unusual, but it pulls out themes. And quite often the themes that come out in that session actually drive all the work going forward, or you come back to that and move forward.
Okay. So let me ask you this. If you were working with, let's say you were working with me, okay?
Yeah.
And we're going over this career timeline.
Yeah.
What are some of the questions that you would ask me? And the reason I ask this is because there's people who are listening who are like, man, what do I do? I'm in my midlife right now.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll work with you, maybe they won't. But for those who don't, what questions would you ask in order to uncover those things and themes that you're talking about?
Yeah. Sometimes it comes around about, what do you consider an achievement? Because the achievement's above the line, and what people actually, it's a bit like you did with your client. What brings them joy? What enabled them to get that achievement? What enabled them to get there? But also the bits is, well, how did you manage the stress? What made that stressful for you in that scenario? What were your coping mechanisms that enabled you to move away from that? Because some of the coping mechanisms we develop to defend ourselves in life actually are fine in the short term, but actually later on in life, they hinder us from moving because we've developed them to protect ourselves in some ways. And in some individuals, it's something that's happened earlier on in life. For some individuals, it's what's happened to them at work. There's some toxic workplaces out there.
Yeah.
That can impact how somebody feels about themselves. So, sometimes unpicking those types of things as well. What sort of protective mechanisms have you got going on at the moment that are stopping you from actually achieving what you want to achieve? And when you bring those up to the surface, you can sometimes slightly unpick them and realize, actually, I don't need to behave like that now.
Yeah.
Because I'm in a safer place. But they become familiar parts of the way you operate as a human being.
When I think back to when I felt the most achievement in my career, and I still feel this to this day, but when I look back and think, when did I feel best about what I do?
Yeah.
I love the questions you're asking, and they're making me think. I think back to when I was over the whole new hire team for the company I worked with. So it's a company of over 300 people. We consistently had every month 20 new people come on. And we'd go to the holiday party at the end of the year. All 300 people were there, and I would know, and they would know me, all 300 people, right? And they'd come up and they say, wow, you made an impact with me. You really helped me. I've been here now for a full year, and I've changed my life in this way. So these concepts that make me feel good are, one, I love recognition. And I know a lot of people won't admit that. I'll admit that. I love recognition. I just love the feeling. I like attention. I think that's a lot of podcast hosts do. People who go on shows do too. Right? And the reason I like that is because the more attention and recognition you have, the more you are in a place to help other people. So I feel for me, the most achievement comes from having attention and helping as many people as possible. And that's why I really love this show. And like you said, sometimes you look forward and you have no idea where you'll be when I'm 50. I'll have no idea what that looks like. And I completely believe that, because even when I was 24, I had no idea that I'd have a podcast and I'd speak to over 300 people and build it to a certain point. I had no idea that would be the case. I had no idea that I'd have a business. I had no clue. So it's just fascinating how, and I never really thought consciously that recognition and attention was something that drove me until you asked that question. But it's true, because it really has subconsciously influenced every action that I've taken since.
So it's a red thread. So you can take that being on the stage with 300 people, you're in an environment there that enables you to gain recognition and to help people. The red thread is present here because you're getting attention, you're on a podcast, but this is there to help people. And not everyone who wants attention wants to help people. So that's your thing. Because not everyone thinks like we do.
Yeah.
Not everyone thinks like we do. So just because you want attention, because you want to see the value that you've actually had in whatever you were doing, and the positive impact it's had on people.
That's true.
Yeah. So that's sort of part of your career DNA, for want of a better phrase, is that's part of your thing. Yeah. And you're doing exactly the same thing here. So if you wanted to do something else, it's where can I help people and get recognition? Yeah.
Wow.
So that's your red thread going forward, whatever you do, if they're the things that drive you.
Now, do you find that those things change? So let me ask you, when it comes to those, just running from those examples, because
Yeah.
it's very different for everyone. It
Yeah,
is
exactly.
but,
Yeah, they will be.
so let's take those two though, because I'm sure it will stay consistent even if they're
Yeah.
different. So recognition and service is really what it is
Yes.
we're working with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you found that other people's themes have changed? So when I'm 50, could those themes change? Because they've been the same for a while.
Yeah.
Or really, are those the underlying themes that will likely continue to be threaded forever?
My experience is they're likely to continue, and they may actually get stronger because you had recognition and service in that role you described. You've got it here. So you're actually amplifying your strengths and capabilities. So where can you amplify that further in the future?
Yeah.
Where could that actually take you? Yeah. Do you want to be on stage and help hundreds of people somewhere, as well as being on here? You know, do you want a keynote speaker? You know, where does that sort of take you from where you are now? But they're your threads that run through. You know, I was talking to a managing director recently, and his thread is managing really complex change and transformation and taking the team with him. He's a natural leader. It's one of its stronger strengths. So he hasn't become a leader because he's got a skill set. He has got a great skill set, but he's come a leader because it's part of the job he really enjoys. So it's the people side of it that he really enjoys.
Yeah.
But it's the change and complex transformation that is at the center of what he does.
Interesting.
And that enables him to actually articulate his narrative for his next role as well. Basically, yeah, I'm a managing director. I've done the P&L. I've worked here, I've worked there. But actually, at the center of what I do is helping people navigate complex change and transformation.
Wow.
That's my track record.
You see, and that's very different from me. And I think that that's a very beautiful thing, that we can each have that thing that truly drives us. And I bet to him, that's just who he is. Like, I am someone who navigates change, help other people do it, because he probably gets a high off of that challenge of things are changing, but I know how to navigate this.
Yeah. Wow. And the other thing to consider is the environment you do it in. Environment is so important. So when I talk to people again about their achievements, I often ask them who was involved, what was the environment you were in, and how did that impact your ability to thrive? Because we don't do this in isolation. We do it in organizations and with people and environments around us. So not only do you look for the right role, but you look for the right environment that you can actually flourish.
Well said. I love that. So let me, in my environment would have been salespeople. I love salespeople specifically because what they put in, they get. If they put in a lot of effort and work, then they get those rewards. And I love helping people find and create those rewards. But I also find it to be the same for a lot of leaders inside of companies. What you put in, you'll get back. So I love helping people in the environment of direct response, in terms of, if you put in this amount of effort, you'll get this amount of effort back. So people along that vein of thinking. What are your personal threads that you've had your life?
I think mine is developing people. I think I was in HR. I had a small period of time. I trained to teach. So I've actually sort of been a lecturer in further education. And even it's supporting people develop when they move from role to role in executive search.
Mm.
You know, so development, love of learning is one of mine. So it's no wonder that I've done learning later in life. You know, it's never too late. I took my MSc recently.
Cool.
I never thought in my wildest dreams that in my 50s I would complete an MSc.
What is
You know,
that?
a master's of science. So
Okay,
it's a
cool.
master's degree. I do a
Congratulations.
master's degree, and you know, not discount doing a PhD at some time in my life. You know, I would never ever have put myself in that sort of space, but I love learning, and I love passing that on to other people, which is why I'm here.
Yeah.
I want to develop people. I want to pass on what I know. The more people know, the better, you know, because, you know, this stuff changes lives, you
Yes.
know. So there's some of my sort of reasons to be, you know, I'm on a mission really to sort of, you know, enable people to look at midlife and the situation they're in with a different perspective, you know.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're working with people, and I guess when you're working with people, but also for yourself, has the way that you set goals changed based on what you've learned in your life?
Yeah, hugely. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm going to come at this slightly different, is bring up the subject of goals versus intention. So this is about goals are where you want to be, intentions are how you want to be. And a lot of the things that clients come to me with is how they want to be in their lives. They want to be more confident. They want to have more clarity around decision making. They want to be a better, you know, they want to be more themselves, you know, and that's intentional living. And that goes alongside setting goals. So their actual external goal may be to get the next role or to navigate out of their current organisation, or if they're out of an organisation to find a new direction. But actually, the intention of living their life differently is potentially stronger. Because I don't want to live my life the way I did up until now. Yeah. Because I might have sacrificed time with family, you know, a life event involving close loved ones may make you sort of realize that actually it wasn't worth it. So, you know, there's that intentionality as well. I want to live my life in a certain way and be different, rather than just the goal itself. So yes, I do set goals, but how I achieve them and the way I live my life and the intention of the way I live my life is important too.
Do you
You
think
know, the two of them
intentions
go
are
together.
more important than the goals
It
themselves?
can be. It can be.
Wow.
It
Because
can
the way
be.
you live your life can determine what your goals even are.
The thing is, they can help you. The things then emerge and happen because I live my life in a certain way. Certain things will happen.
Yeah.
You know.
So what is
As
that? What are your intentions? How do you want to live your
um,
life now?
I want to live my life in a way that's true to me, and that is, you know, sometimes saying no to certain work that comes my way. You know, it's like I want to do the work that aligns with what I do and where I serve best. So certain work may not be right for me, so I can make a choice. You know, I wrote a number of things down in a book of why I was going to work on my own. And one of them was to have more freedom. You know, one of my drivers is freedom as part of my value set. So having control over what I do is important, you know. And I'm going to be honest, this week I've had quite a full diary, and you know, that's knocked me slightly off balance this week because I normally like some space
Yeah.
and leave some space because then I have freedom to do some things I want to do or do things spontaneously. And if my diary is too full, I can't do that. So there's more space next week. You know, but I know that about me. So my intention is to live with a bit more freedom, you know, and I wanted to have the freedom to amend and change what I do. and not be in a fixed place. But you probably know this, running your own business, you don't just set it up and it stays the same, and it evolves and iterates and other things come up, you know. So running my own business is actually an intention to actually do things myself.
That's true.
So that's intentional.
Absolutely. And the business is the vehicle to deliver that intentionality that you created for yourself.
Yeah. And I actually had a name long before I set up my business. So my business is Human Decisions. And I decided that a human decision was one where your head, heart, and gut were aligned.
Say that one more time.
A human decision is one where your head, heart, and gut are aligned.
Head, heart, and gut are aligned is a decision.
So it's an embodied decision. It's not one that's made just up here. You know?
So you know instinctually, if, like, as an example, you know who to say no to and what to say no to. So instinctually, we do know what we don't want.
We do, but we don't listen to it. It's been conditioned out of us in our society. One, the pace of life is so quick. You know, it's busy, and that gets celebrated. And actually, to connect with our instinctual feelings, actually takes space and calmness, and there's not a lot of that around. And for some people listening, that may seem completely woo, you know, instinct and all the rest of it. But neuroscience shows that is not the case.
Yeah.
Neuroscience shows that the heart and brain connection, the gut and brain connection, you know, make a huge difference. And a lot of information goes from our body through to our brains more than the other way around.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, that the science proves that now. And there's neurons that we have in our head that are in our gut and in our heart, not to the same quantity, but they're there and they have an impact on us.
It's just interesting that we even have to have science behind that, because that feeling is it's the most real and primal thing that we have, because everything else is just thoughts based on experience, based on what we know, the limited knowledge we have. Like that gut feeling has been there since we were in the tribes thousands and thousands of years ago, and that's all we need to rely on.
Yeah.
So how do we reconnect to that? You mentioned space and calmness. But how can we reconnect and really listen to that gut feeling? Because 99% of the time, it's crap.
Yeah, I think part of it is, you know, it's a generic term, mindfulness. And that is finding spaces to be present. And that can be a number of ways that we do that. But being present essentially means that you're not worrying about what happened 10 minutes ago or last week, and you're not concerned what's going to happen in the next hour, and you're not concerned what happens next week or next year, because the only real moment that exists is the one we're in this present time. So whether that's going for a walk, being in nature, that's some of the best place we can connect. And there's the science behind that as well, how it grounds us and changes our physicality. You know, and give ourselves time to sit and just be, where we're not distracted by anything else. And there are lots of mindfulness practices out there. You know, I'm not going to take too long of us to sort of do that, but it's being in the present moment and potentially just asking yourselves questions, journaling. You know, how am I really feeling today? You know, what am I feeling about this decision? You'll be amazed if you write that question down. How am I really feeling about this decision? And just letting the words come out and sit there quietly. And just because you have to allow the feeling to come up and create some sort of word. Because when the feeling comes up within us, it doesn't sort of come up in the same way as our cognitive thoughts do. You have to sort of sift it out a bit. Am I feeling heavy about this decision? Am I feeling light about this decision? What's my energy feeling? You know, have I got a sense of excitement about this decision or dread? What does that really mean? What do I need to find out more about? You know?
Yeah. not even what do I think about this decision, but how do I feel about
Yeah.
this? How
Yeah.
does this make me feel?
Yeah. It can even be, where does this sit in my body? You
Mm,
know, is it sitting heavy on your chest or heavy on your shoulders? You know, or do you actually feel physically lighter because you're thinking of doing something? Is there a sort of frizz on and excitement? Think, well, yeah, I really want to do this because I'm quite excited about it. You know,
Now,
so
what if sometimes the decision that is right for us can be scary because it's different, challenging, or out of our comfort zone? And at times, doing something that is challenging, different, or out of our comfort zone can create that heaviness.
it
So,
can.
how do we differentiate that feeling of discomfort versus the gut instinctual feeling that this isn't right for us? Are they
Yeah,
different?
they are different. Yeah,
Okay.
because you can ask yourself, am I just a bit scared about this because I haven't done it before? Or, is this the wrong decision? And the thing is, if you've done some of the self-awareness work, for example, if we go back to our red threads, for example, you want recognition and you want to service people. Yeah. You've got that information as well. So that self-awareness piece comes in alongside this, the information you know about yourself. So if it's a role where there's lots of recognition, but actually you're not sure there's much service in this, yeah, I'm going to get some, but am I going to add value? Who's going to benefit? Is this really a service orientated sort of scenario? You'll
Yeah.
feel that internally and you can ask yourself questions. But if you know what those red threads are, you can go back to that.
Yes. Are
Yeah.
those threads the same thing as what you defined as values earlier, or are they different?
They're a combination. Red threads are a combination of your values and also what your strengths are. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a little combination and how those things come together. It's a bit like weaving. You've got these threads and they weave together,
Yeah.
you know, to create a pattern that's yours effectively,
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell me about values specifically. When did you even become aware of the power of values?
I, ca- I came across that when I started training to be a career coach, because we did quite a lot of work on values and I went through it as well, because we all did the sort of piece of work we give to clients as well. Um, and I had this complete aha moment doing it and going, that's why that didn't work. I know why I didn't stay in teaching. I spoke to you earlier about liking freedom and having some control about what I do. Teaching's really constrained. It's repetitive. There's not a huge amount of room for creativity around the material that you teach. The curriculums are quite constrained. It's the same thing every week. It's the same timetable every week. So for me, I look back on that and went, oh, it's okay, I left teaching and I didn't carry on with that because it was never going to be the right fit for me. So for me, that was so powerful for me when I did that. And it's like, well, other people are going to benefit from this too. And I had one client who worked with me on this, and she'd actually done something slightly different than we've discussed, in that she'd set up her own business, but be invited by a client to go and work permanently again in a permanent role after running her own business. But she did it 4 days a week and had one foot outside because she wasn't 100% sure she'd made the right decision. And when we did the values work, and she went, I am aligned with where I am. This does work for me. And it was at that point she stepped into that organisation fully
Oh,
and committed. Because up until then, she kept one foot outside because there was some pressure on her, or you're giving in, going back into corporate,
yeah.
why don't you stay with your own business, etc. But she realised that some of the values that drive her were fully present and fully aligned with where she was in this organisation. And
Wow.
that was when she took her foot from outside and fully committed. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, instead of doing 4 days, she's now back full time. and she completely put to one side at this sort of season of her career. You know, she can pick that up later, but at the moment she knows she's in the right place. So
Wow.
this is really powerful stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like it, because that could be a very scary thing, going and opening
Yeah.
your own business. And then the thought of going back to the workplace can be scary, because a lot of people think, well, if I go back, then it's going to seem as if I failed, or it's going to seem that things didn't work out for me. So that's a scary decision, but it seems like she made that decision with grace.
It is. And the other thing is, quite often when people can't work out what's wrong, they're in the right role, the right level, things, you know, externally look great, but I can't work out why this just doesn't feel right. It's often the values mismatch that is the reason. Yeah. And the other reason for values is that there's been research and quite a lot around burnout, that values misalignment is one of the key elements of burnout. Because when you're working in alignment with your values, things feel easier. It's more fulfilling. You know, your values recognition and service. So actually, those are values. You know, and you've got skills around that enable you to do that, and strengths around that enable you to do that. Yeah. So,
how many values would you say that we are driven by at any given time? Is there a certain number?
The work that I do, I think I've got a set of 12 in the actual full sessions that I do with my clients. And there's normally about 4 or 5 ones at the top. They might move around they might move around a little bit in terms of which ones are driving you the most at this point. For example, if your circumstances change, work-life balance might come up, and at other times it might drop down a little bit. But in general terms, they tend to be sort of, you know, there or thereabouts constantly. They're the things that are going to drive you. Yeah,
gotcha.
They're going to drive you. So they are important. And the thing is, when you're working against them, life feels exhausting. You can't wait to get to Friday. Fatigue, burnout, and quite often there can be a bit of conflict as well. But it's important to understand that not everyone's values are the same. And I just want to highlight this here, because there might be people listening, especially people who've got real high values about fairness and equity. Some people are really driven by fairness in their work. Yeah, fairness in the work environment, that it's fair. Things are done fairly.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite a strong human driver about, you know, is this fair? And in some organizations where things are done unfairly, and this is true for not just fairness, but other values, it can actually feel like almost like a punch in the gut when something happens that actually, you know, is in complete conflict with your values, to the point where you cannot believe it's happened. You know, these people, you know, I get a few people who go, I can't believe this happened within the organization.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is that sometimes they will go, well, what could I have done differently? Because there's this complete disbelief that somebody could act in that way, that there's that slight twist and turn, that it's like, well, was it something I did? Because they can't believe or accept that someone would act in that way.
Because they have a different set of values.
Because they've got a different set of values, and they just cannot imagine in any way, shape or form that they would ever act like that. So how could anybody else? So I do work with clients sometimes actually accepting that people can be that way, and it wasn't just them.
That seems like a prerequisite to understand that everyone is operating from a different operating system entirely than you.
They are. Yeah, completely.
Wow, very fascinating. Okay, so so just for those listening, Tina does have a workbook that helps you to discover your values. The name of that workbook is the Discover Your Values Workbook.
It is indeed.
So is there, because I want people to get the workbook, but is there a question that you ask that does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to identifying what those 4 to 5 core values are?
Yeah. What brings you joy? And what's made you proud?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You will normally find underneath there They're generic ones for life. The ones that I've got in my workbook are specifically designed to enable you to identify your values from a career perspective. But what's made you happy? What, a situation where you were happy, where you were proud, that you enjoyed, those sort of 3 areas. And just think about, what was it about that environment that made me happy? Did I have loads of people around me? So, is one of my drivers being connected and actually being part of a team? What made me proud? It could be that you did something of value for society. That's, society impact can be another value, especially in the world we live in today. So what made you proud was that you added value to something that made society a better place. And what did you enjoy as well? And that could be that you actually enjoyed a challenge, for example, that something was really challenging, but you enjoyed the challenge. It was the challenge that you enjoyed. So actually, am I driven by challenge? And have I got enough challenge in my next role?
I think that's one of mine.
Yeah. Very quickly, on time, I had a client who was female. She had young family, and she made a decision to move to what she thought would be an easier role, because she was trying to navigate managing being a mum and work. When we did the work around values, she didn't have enough challenge, and that's what was driving her mad.
Wow.
That was the issue. She'd taken a role where there wasn't enough challenge. It seemed the right decision at the time, but that was working against her.
Yeah.
It was frustrating.
So her head was saying one thing, but her gut was actually another.
Indeed, it was.
Very fascinating. This is a really awesome conversation, Tina.
Thank you so much.
I've really
it's been an absolute pleasure.
You've helped me. I mean, you've personally helped me with these questions. So
Thank you.
You've helped me. You've helped a lot of other people too. So tell us, where can we find your Discover Your Values workbook? Yeah,
it's on the homepage of my website, which is www.humandecisions.co.uk.
That's a really great website. I like that. That's cool.
Thank you.
And this is a free download for people.
It's a free download. Just sign up and you can download it for free.
I'm going to go grab it. Guys, if you're listening, go grab it too, because when you identify these values, it just makes all of your future decisions that much easier to navigate. But it also will lead you to more fulfillment, more joy, and you'll have more of those proud moments in what you do. Tina, where can people follow you? I know you're on LinkedIn and you post a lot of great content there. Is there anywhere else we should keep an eye out for you?
Yeah, I'm on it's humandecisions.uk on Instagram, but my main place is LinkedIn, that I sort of post most of my content, update blogs on my website. And yeah, they're the 2 main places. Thank you.
That's awesome. Guys, there's links in the description to go check out everything that Tina's up to. And should you decide that you are looking for someone to help you make these upcoming decisions in your professional life, should you be in that midlife phase where you're looking to renew and really become clear on where you're headed, then start that conversation with Tina. Go to her website in the description or go to her LinkedIn, shoot her a message. Tina, this has been an awesome conversation. I'm so glad Pierre introduced us. I see why. Pierre, you're listening. I love you, brother. Thank you very much. You know the people I love talking to. And Tina, thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, spreading the word. Absolutely. Talk to you soon. Awesome conversation around where do I head next? And the thing is, this has been a conversation about midlife, and for people who are in that phase where they're wondering, with what I've been doing, is this what I want to continue doing? Do I want to reinvent myself? Do I have that story of confidence, that story of self-belief, or is it time to write a new story? The funny thing is, I find this conversation very useful for people in their 20s, their teens. I think this has been a very valuable conversation for everybody. And if you are someone who is in that midlife phase, start that conversation with Tina. If you've been in the workforce for 30, 40 years, doing what you've been doing for a long time, but you're feeling like there's something missing, you're ready for something new, but you're not quite sure what that is, you want to dive in, certainly start by identifying what your values are. Go to the link in the description, download Tina's free Discover Your Values workbook. And when you're ready to take it to that next steps, shoot her a message and start the conversation to see how you guys can work together one-on-one in order to really carve out that new identity and that new path for yourself. You never know where just one conversation could lead you. I know that this has been helpful for me. I can't imagine what a one-on-one conversation would be. So if you found value from this conversation, please share this episode with just one other person who could use it as well. Thank you for being the best part of the Be Better team. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.